Building compositions with layers is a long drawn-out way of saying building a composite. See, in After Effects, whenever you create a composition, you're creating a composite graphic, which is just a blend of all of those layers together. Now, composites are created using layers. So in this video, of course, we're going to function on how layers work to create composites. To get started, double-click the Training Swoosh composition in your project panel. That way we can see the project here in the composition window and down here in the timeline. Now I'm going to click and drag on the top part of my timeline just to give me a little bit more space so we can look at all the layers that are contained within our project. Now, if your layers don't quite look like this with these switches, click this button down here at the bottom that'll toggle the switches and modes. These are different features that we can go back and forth between to make adjustments to our layers. Now, layers have two primary functions inside of After Effects. One is their organization vertically. This determines their visibility in the layer hierarchy. So if we select layer 2, see how I have the word training here? If I click on that layer and drag it all the way down below layer 10 and let go, notice it's going to disappear. That's because it's below all of the layers in that layer hierarchy. Now, I know this background layer is what's obstructing that view. So I can change that layer hierarchy, or I could change the view of this layer by either moving it in the hierarchy, like moving it back down to the bottom of my project panel. Here, let's move it back up just above our training layer. Or I could open my triangle here for the layer. And I have transform options. So if I open my transform options, these are all the typical options that you'll get with most layers inside of a composition inside of After Effects. So for example, I could control the anchor point, position, scale, rotation, or opacity. Well, if I'm trying to see the layer below, I want to change the opacity from a value of 100% down to a lower value, say 50%. Now, I can click and drag on these parameters so I could get an update here in my comp window, or I could just click directly on the parameter and type a value, say 50%, and press enter. Now, if you have more than one of these options open at any given time, you can move between the different sections by pressing the Tab key. So, for example, let's click on the scale. I'm going to click on this value for scale and change it to 50. And when I press Tab, it's automatically going to move to the next field. Now notice it made my background 50% the size of my composition. If I continue to press Tab, I could go down to rotation. So continue to press Tab and get to this second rotation option here. Let's change this to an angle of 45 and press Tab to move to the next one. Now notice the layers moved at a 45-degree angle. I think you understand how transform options can change the visible appearance of a layer inside of a composition window. Now let's click anywhere else in the timeline to deselect our opacity value. Now I'm just going to press Command-Z on the Mac. You could press Control-Z on Windows to just undo and get back to this current state where our opacity is around 58. Now let's collapse layer 9. Now that we have a firm grasp on how to visually control the appearance of our layers using the layer hierarchy or using layer properties, we can now also address the timing. So if you go to the middle of your timeline, you'll see a red line, and at the top of it, there's a yellow thing that looks sort of like a guitar pick. If you click on that and drag, this is your current time indicator. Now, as I'm dragging, there are no changes happening inside of my composition. This is because nothing is animated yet. All of the layers are on, and they're all visible over the entire length of the project. So what I want to do is have my background start, and then have my graphic elements appear, and then I'll have the word training appear. So to control that, I'm going to adjust the horizontal adjustment of layers in the timeline. So let's move our current time indicator to around 1 second. Notice as I'm clicking and dragging, I'm getting an update here and an update here in the left side of our timeline panel. You can click either on the current time button here in the bottom of your composition window or in the upper left corner of your timeline. And once you click, you can specify an exact time to go to. So if you're not already at 1 second, go ahead and type 100 and then press OK to make sure you're there. Now I want to trim all of these graphic elements to appear at this one point. So I'm going to click on layer 8 and hold down Shift and click on layer 1 to select all of those layers. You can trim more than one layer at a time just by selecting multiple layers. If I hover my mouse over the left side of all those layers, I get this double arrow icon. Now, as I click and drag, I can trim the start point of those layers. Notice as I move past my current time indicator, the graphics disappear. If you want to snap the start point of your layer, as you're dragging, hold down Shift, and then it'll snap directly to your current time indicator. Now I know I want the word training to appear at the top of my layer hierarchy. So let's click on layer 10 and drag it back up to the top of my layer hierarchy. And let's move all the way down the timeline to around 8 seconds. Here, I'm going to trim the start point of my training layer. But rather than clicking directly on the left side of that layer, I'm going to use a key command. If you hold down Option or Alt on the PC and press the left bracket key, which is the key just to the right of the letter P, you'll automatically trim the start point of whatever layer you have selected. Now I'm going to use a very similar command to change the out point of our other graphic elements. So select layer 2, hold down Shift and click through layer 9. These are all of our graphic elements, and I'm going to press Option or Alt on the PC, and then I'll press right bracket, which is 2 keys to the right of the letter P. Now I've trimmed my out point of my graphic layer. Now, if I just want to move 1 frame down the timeline or 1 frame up the timeline, I can press Page Up or Page Down. Now, I want to press Page Down and select layer 1 and just trim 1 more frame off that layer. So I'll hold down Alt or Option again and press left bracket. So now if you press Page Up, we can go from graphics to Page Down, where we just have the text over top of our background layer. So to summarize, when we're talking about layers inside of compositions, you do have the utmost control. You just need to remember, if you're making adjustments vertically, you're controlling the appearance of that layer amongst the other layers. If you're making adjustments horizontally, you're probably making adjustments to the timing of that layer or when it appears in the composition.